What's good, beautiful people? The Black Thumb here, and today we're going to be talking about indicators and signs that you have a healthy orchid that is thriving. So let's jump right into it. All right, so whenever you are taking care of an orchid or whenever you have an orchid under your care, there are going to be some pretty hallmark signs that your orchid is either doing really well or that your orchid might need a little bit more attention and a little bit more care or a change in your care routine. So for the purposes of today, we're going to focus on the signs that your orchid is thriving and doing well. And as many of you probably have already guessed, the number one sign that your orchid is doing well is it is flowering. It is in bloom, and there are, and in particular, not just that it's in bloom, but that all of the buds are flowering, meaning you didn't lose any buds along the way. Now in this case, this is an orchid that was flowering, it's dropped a few flowers, and then it decided to grow, the flowering spike decided to grow even further and give me 6 new flowers. And so this is a hallmark classic sign that your orchid is doing well, it's thriving, it's in the right environment when you have nice, beautiful blooms like these. So that's number one. So the number 2 indicator that your orchid is doing well and is healthy and thriving is looking at new leaf growth. And so you can see in this orchid that we've got a couple of new leaves that have grown recently. And so these are always good signs, right? That means that the orchid is getting enough of the nutrients that it needs and enough of the energy that it needs to push out this new growth, which is always a good sign. And then one of the things to think about and look at when you're looking at your leaves specifically is comparing size between the leaf that previously grew and the most recent leaf that has grown. And typically that is also an indicator of health. So in this case, you see that this older leaf, it's still a new leaf, but it's the older of these 2 leaves. This leaf is much smaller than this leaf, meaning that this orchid is getting healthier, right? So when we have diminished growth of the leaves compared to the other leaves that are on the orchid, that's typically an indicator that something has changed either in your care routine, the environment, and so that growth gets diminished or stunted. But when it is back in the right environment, or when you're back on your routine or more consistent with your care, then you start to see an elevation in that growth or an increase in that growth. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. So again, you want your leaves to be nice and firm. You want them to, you don't want them to feel flimsy or leathery, because that's typically an indicator that you're not watering enough or that something in the environment isn't quite right. So if you have nice firm leaves, if you're seeing new leaf growth, and if you're seeing bigger leaves as the new leaves are growing, these are all great signs that your orchid is nice and healthy. So that is number 2. All right, number 3 is new root growth. And as you can see, at this orchid here, we've got some new root growth happening here. We've also got lots of new root growth happening at kind of the base of the orchid, and you can kind of see through the plastic. And so you want to see new root growth happening both above and below the pot. And so we've got nice indicators of new root growth happening down below. And one of the things about new root growth that you want to be paying attention to is the color of the roots, and also just how firm are they, right? And that they are getting longer and starting to expand and either grow down into the pot, or in some cases they're growing out of the pot like this root here. Now, one of the other things that you want to be aware of is that sometimes, especially when roots are very new and very fresh, you have kind of this silver part, or the older part of the root, that looks more like what a normal orchid, and in particular Phalaenopsis, air root, or root would look like. And then you have these little tips that can be either like a bright green, or I've even had them in like almost like a deep maroon. And these tips are not an indicator that something's wrong. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They can be indicators of the health of that particular orchid root. So if you have a difference in color where it's like silver, 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 and then it becomes green, or it becomes that deeper maroon color or a brighter green color, that is not something to be worried about. That's actually something that you want to see. We want to encourage that type of growth. And typically, however, the larger that maroon or bright green or deep green tip is, that is also an indicator of health. So the bigger that color differentiation is, the more healthy that root is, and in turn, you can assume that your orchid is also doing well and thriving. So that's number 3. Okay, so let's finish up with our last indicator that your orchid is doing well and healthy and thriving. And really that just comes down to your orchid being clean and not having any pests or any signs of disease. And as you can see, this orchid is very clean. The leaves look very clean. There's no signs of pest in the potting media or beneath the surface, as well as at the surface or above the surface of the orchid. And so let's be honest, pests are a part of taking care of orchids, and in particular rescuing and reviving orchids. So if you have not encountered any type of pest with your orchids, kudos to you. Keep it going for as long as you can, but just know that your day is probably coming. And when it does, take a look at my previous video that I made on how to get rid of pests with an organic homemade pesticide, because that will definitely go a long way in helping you keep your orchids clean, healthy, and thriving. And with that being said, that's all I have for you all today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the love and support that I've gotten over these last handful of months. If you found this video helpful in any way, make sure you subscribe and then go out and like, share, comment. Let me know if there are any signs that I missed of healthy orchids that give you good indicators that you are doing the right things and that your orchids are thriving. And in the meantime, I hope that helps and your orchids keep blooming.